but specifically for you in your situation with your strengths at your firm, at the size it is with your team. What is the next thing to do? Because you can't do it all. And if you do come out of an event like that and you think you're going to implement 10 new things, you're wrong.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to From the Ground Up. I'm Zach Conway here with Kelsey McKenna. Kelsey, I'm losing my tan already from Miami.
So bad for you. My sunburn is finally slowly starting to go away.
You're in the first phase, the sunburn to tan transition.
I don't get tan, so it's just sad.
Stage
Sunburn
burn.
to pale. Yeah, it's pale, sunburn, pale. This is actually, I think, the worst sunburn I've gotten in years, honestly.
It was easy to get it, even with, I felt like I was putting sunscreen on constantly.
Yeah.
But we were out in the sun, basically.
It's the white sand, It's just
that is it.
reflecting
That's
up
interesting.
at us,
Yeah. Or, you and I just sort of looking up at the sky, thinking about the future.
Just dreaming, yeah.
Staring at the sun, getting burned. Well, why were we in the sun, Kelsey? Why are you sunburned?
We were at Future Proof Citywide in Miami, which was literally on the sand, like
The
in
white
the
sand.
sand. The white sand. I didn't realize that. The Future Proof in California, in Huntington Beach, is like on the boardwalk, basically, and there's a big like tarp fake grass thing down. So I was a little surprised. Luckily, I brought sandals. But yeah, it was in the sand. It was great. It was great other than the sunburn. I was a little dehydrated and a bit sunburned.
It was funny seeing people in no one was overdressed,
Yeah.
but seeing people in somewhat fancier shoes just trying to trudge through the sand.
Yeah.
It was fun. We learned a lot, as we always do. And just for context, I think probably the people that listen to this know what we're talking about when we talk about future proof, and we do kind of bring it up a lot. But our last episode was talking about us on the way to Miami, so we're officially back. But it's a conference that I would say is unlike any other in our industry, called wealth management, financial services, where kind of a mix of mostly independent financial advisors, technology companies supporting those advisors, and then sort of other types of firms. A lot of, venture capital. So venture capital and private equity thinking about or currently investing in the space. It is really, in our opinion, the place to actually try to tell the future of what's coming for advisors, how customers think about advisors, and what's going to be needed for advisors to be successful in that future, and per the name of the conference, become future proof. And I think you and I had similar kind of headline takeaways while we were there. There was a lot, right? Things about new technology, how advisors are thinking about the future, what they're trying to do. But we had I would say kind of similar thesis points coming out of this event in particular. So I figured we could share each of ours and kind of pick them apart a little bit. And hopefully that'll be helpful if people weren't able to make it, or even if you did kind of, hear our perspective on what we think at least is some of the bigger takeaways from Future Proof in Miami. So you get to go first. I think, you, by the way, if people don't know, Kelsey is really working on her emerging social media influencer presence.
Don't say that publicly. I do not like that.
It's now official. Don't edit that snippet out.
Edit it out.
But I think it's a good thing because you have very good takes in general. Lots of advisors get to hear them one-to-one. So we need you, putting this stuff out into the world more often rather than just me ranting on all of these things and platforms and whatever. Also, when, ever a take is wrong, now you can kind of get some of it back instead of just me. That's really my goal in this, and urging you out into the world with these hot takes. All right. So what was yours? What was your big takeaway thought from getting sunburned?
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know if I would call it one big takeaway necessarily. One thing I did find interesting about this future proof compared to the other two I've been to is I do feel like most advisors I spoke with, and even like tech providers, it was a little more exploratory, I would say. Like it felt like people were more so exploring. They weren't seeking one really specific thing. Whereas I think at previous future proofs, when I'm in the breakthroughs, usually they're like, yeah, I have this one goal. Like I'm looking to replace this piece of tech. I'm looking to achieve this specific thing or something like that. This felt like everyone I met with was more so like, I'm open. Like I'm open to learning or I'm open to networking. I'm open to like hearing what's going on or what the future will bring. So I do think that was kind of an interesting difference between, and maybe it was just who I met with, but that was something that stood out to me for sure. But coming out of it, yeah, I think it did kind of, it's funny because ever since we started this podcast, Zach has basically been pushing me to more publicly speak about things that I talk to him about and advisors about one-on-one. So you've really been consistently pushing me for over a year now. But this was the first time I actually felt motivated to post on social media, kind of hinting at, yeah, I do have stuff to say about this industry that can be kind of taken without a ton of context, like not in a one-on-one situation.
By the way, not to totally derail this, but what do you think? Let's unpack the psychology of I got you sort of comfortable to do this. We do a podcast together and we say stuff about the industry all the time, and then we post these episodes. And what is it about you putting it in writing on your own LinkedIn that is, stressful. You're still getting comfortable with?
Hopefully this is like relatable to people, but I do feel like so much of the work I do is very contextual. So when I'm working one-on-one with someone, I can very clearly connect my point or my opinion to their specific situation. And I think in the podcast, that was the first hurdle for me to jump, was like, I don't know who's listening. I don't know what your situation is. So take all of what I'm saying with a grain of salt, because it only applies in certain situations, or this advice is only good if you have already done these 20 things. So I do think that it's helped to do the podcast, but the podcast is long form. I think in general, I'm a lot more comfortable with long form because there can be built-in context. So I can qualify something I'm saying, or we can go back and forth and kind of pick something apart. And I think I'm more comfortable there than I am with, this is something I'm saying very clearly and I'm sticking to it, and I don't know who's going to read it, but here you go.
It's also, neither you or I nor I want to be wrong. I think
maybe. But you're always wrong and right to someone. And that's, I think, where it kind of, like, not knowing who will see it is something that I think gets me uncomfortable. Even if I'm like public speaking, there is a sense of audience in that. You can feel the energy in the room if you're like public speaking live. And for some reason, at any time there's an anonymous audience is where I get really like just
because the pushback can be so vast.
Yeah.
Right. And so I find myself, like, even in LinkedIn posts, I struggle with actually short, punchy, get something out quickly, because in my head I'm like, I need to attack all the angles that I know are sort of open angles to my whatever argument I'm making. So all of a sudden I've written an essay to address what I know the pushback's going to be on whatever topic.
Yeah, the anticipated pushback.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's why I felt coming out of this future proof, maybe because so many more people I spoke with were more exploratory and more just like generally open, and they weren't kind of seeking like a very, very narrow specific solution to something, which I know in some of your takeaways is almost, it's in some ways problematic, but in other ways, at least for me, for someone with my skill set, it's exciting because it shows that people can feel that change is coming, and people can feel that there's change needed, and they are just generally open to hearing new takes or new ways of thinking about things, which I think gave me the confidence to post on social media one time. And now, I'm going to have to keep it going, because if I don't, it'll just be this weird, I guess it's the public accountability thing. And that's probably why you and Kelly, our director of marketing, were like, you got to post it, because it's basically saying, I will continue to post, or I will continue to publicly speak about growth and about building businesses within this industry. So yeah, this has been very me focused so far. Let's unpack my issues with public.
Well, I think It'll take that's a whole sub series. So we can at least start that now. But that alone is an interesting takeaway. And I do think it's a function of like this conference in particular has now existed between Huntington and Colorado and now Miami 4 years, I think, right? Huntington will be the fourth year,
the
fourth one in September. Mm-hmm. And so, even sort of like a microcosm of the industry, although it's quite big at this point, advisors have been exposed to things like what is the future thought process stuff that if you're kind of in your bubble at your desk working with your current customers, you don't get exposure to that. I also think that's true for people in technology companies within this industry, because I had a very similar sense of like people are open, meaning my status quo is uncomfortable, and mm-hmm. I'm exploring sort of bigger picture of where is this all going, and am I going to be in the same company, and what does the future hold, and which is a double-edged sword. It's really great because then you have open conversations. On the one hand, we want to talk we want to be selling and pitching seeds as a specific offering. But for us, when we're there, it's also helpful for us to kind of get the pulse of advisors and how they're thinking about the future. And because that helps us kind of figure out where we fit in and how we can be most successful in helping advisors. But I had the same sense. People had not very narrow agendas. They were kind of looking at all sorts of things.
It does open up. There's a lot more room, I think, when most people there are approaching the event that way. And like you said, of course, we want to be selling. And I, as you know, don't consider myself like a salesperson, really. I consider myself more of like someone who can find a solution. Like you have a problem, I'll help you find a solution. And sometimes that might be seeds and sometimes it might not. But I think that openness, there was a lot more room for give and take, I think. Like I have something to give, you have something to give me. And so we can both kind of play off each other. And so I do feel like I had maybe the most fun of any of the future proofs I've been to, but I feel like that was because my version of fun is like business problem solving, and I was just so deep in so many conversations, whether it was like startup founders, advisor founders, people who work at firms, and it just seemed like everywhere I went I was like stumbling into conversations. I feel like some of this was you though. I think you actually were stumbling me into conversations, because I think I've been building this guide about like growth constraints, and so you kept just teeing me up and being like, here's somebody who has a growth problem, you want to talk? So maybe that was what it was, but to me that's like my version of fun, like the nerdiest version of fun.
Well, let's get into that, because this is what you kind of covered in your LinkedIn post recap around. So yes, some of the advisors were coming to me and I was passing them to you, but a bunch, in conversations you were having, as you wrote, many saying, how do I take my business to the next level? Mm-hmm. And I think like there was a openness to that question in a way that I don't think has really existed before, mm-hmm. right? Advisors rightly and wrongly tend to think they have the answer to that question very often. So I do think there is, broadly this shift of mentality of like, okay, wait, maybe if I do seek longer term, quote unquote, sustainable organic growth, and I want to take my business to the next level, I'm actually open to answers that I may not already have.
Well, and open to giving answers that previously, what was I think so interesting when I say like a give, take, having these conversations one-on-one is very rewarding if the founder, advisor, or whomever I'm speaking with is open to actually being honest about where they're at and what they're struggling with. And I think that's what I've kind of run into historically in the industry. I've learned so much working with like hundreds of early stage advisors now over my career. And I've also worked with founders of startups over my career, and I can connect a ton of dots. But if you aren't honest with yourself, and therefore you can't be honest with me about what you're struggling with, then we can't like problem solve together. And I think that's what I mean by the give, take. And that's what I was getting at in my little post, was just kind of saying people were actually asking someone like me who I haven't built an RAA by myself. I'm not a finfluencer, as they say. I'm not up on a stage, but they were open to actually just saying, hey, what do you have to give me, or what could you pull apart from this situation? And here's an honest take on where I am. And I think that was, I guess I'm just coming to this now, but that was quite different from previous Future Proofs and just in general from other industry events that I've been to, where people say, it's like we always say, you say you want to grow, but like, what do you mean by that? Are you willing to do the things that it takes? Are you willing to be the type of leader who sits down and says, oh, I might be part of the problem, or, oh, I didn't think of that, or, oh, someone who on the surface doesn't look like they may have something to give me might, and I should just be open, and I should just be exploring. And this kind of goes back to the whole point of this podcast. I think the whole idea behind this podcast was me and you at the first Future Proof that I ever went to with you and Mike, and us just going back and forth and pulling apart, why are we facing these challenges? What do we need to do to get to the next level? And this idea that those same things could be applied in your wealth management business is kind of the foundation of this whole thing. So I do think this was like a full circle moment for me of just actually meeting other advisor founders who were like, yeah, I'm totally open to just sharing. This is my weakness. This is my strength. Like, this is where I'm struggling. I hate doing this. I love doing that. I struggle with this. My team struggles with that. Like, it was very different than previous conversations I've had at previous conferences, for sure.
I think what Future Proof has done intentionally, unintentionally well is being a filter for, the types of advisors that are attending. Yeah, it's to have fun in Miami, right? Part of going to conferences that's always part of the answer, but that there really is actual pain points that these advisor entrepreneurs are trying to specifically address around getting their businesses to the next level. So whether that's because they're doing it for the first time, generally younger advisors, building their businesses, trying to really understand what that foundation needs to be successful in the future, and advisors that have built substantial businesses or practices transitioning into businesses that at a minimum don't want to atrophy, at a minimum are seeing the what's coming and how things are so dramatically changing that they're very open to hear new answers that, again, they maybe thought they had themselves, but are realizing maybe they don't. I think that's a filter that exists there. I also think there's a filter for, like, give me something tangible, right? So, and why I think people want to have those conversations with you is because they're getting a lot from the stages, right? They're, really, really incredible speakers and industry leaders. And so maybe there's some like light bulb moments, but with conferences in general, like, you're desperate to actually figure out how to bring something to life. And the second you leave that beach and get home to wherever you exist as a business, that part's really, really hard. And connecting, this sort of big idea that you maybe pull out of a 15-minute presentation on a stage, what does that actually mean to you specifically as a business, and how are you going to do anything about it? So there's desperation is not the right word, but there's an excitement, I think, with advisors who are there to actually learn, but there to actually implement. And for me, like, I remember, like, that was always what was sort of the blessing and the curse of going to conferences before Future Proof existed. But okay, I've seen too much, right? Like, I've now accepted the problems we have internally as a business, but okay, what am I going to do about that, right? I have some big idea, but that's nothing without, some game plan around execution. So yeah, you're there with some clear, tangible answers. Yeah. So, and I think that's generally
and
lacking.
specifically, I think it's taking it from like the what and kind of the why and just the general buy-in for change and like questioning the status quo and all these exciting new ideas, and then taking it down to the level of like, what do I focus on right now, and like why? Like, why and how? So like, why is that? So there's the big why of like, why do I need to care at all? And I think Future Proof does a great job with their speaking lineup and vendors and all in the breakthroughs. It's amazing. But I do think that there is a need within this industry. And it was just so clear, I guess, at this event specifically, because it felt like everyone I was talking to, even the startup founders, they were all in the same place of like, we're looking around and we all know this industry is a little bit behind in terms of like innovation and technology and all that stuff, and is kind of playing catch up with other industries. And so it's easy to look around and just be overwhelmed by how many options there are. So you could transform your business in 40 different ways. You could, and you have so many options for how to grow. Even saying you want to grow, like there's so many different meanings to that. And I think being able to just really get to the heart of like, okay, but specifically for you in your situation with your strengths at your firm, at the size it is with your team, what is the next thing to do? Because you can't do it all. And if you do come out of an event like that and you think you're going to implement 10 new things, you're wrong. You'll implement 0 new things. You'll implement 10 new things poorly. And you're going to end up creating like an operational drag on your business by trying to change too many things too quickly. So it is definitely a matter of prioritization. It's a matter of like a bunch in data points in, and then, okay, what's the right first move? And then from there, where do we go? Which is definitely tied into kind of all the one-on-ones that I have with advisors in real world, non-Miami, non-beach life. It's really about kind of creating that trust and intimacy between me and the advisor and actually hearing them out and getting in the weeds enough to be like, okay, well, it sounds like based on everything you're telling me that this is the right first step. But it's hard if you're in the seat, if you're the leader in the seat, that's really hard to do because you're just so close to it. And you've taken in and you're also probably consuming a bunch of podcasts like our podcast and a bunch of other, newsletters, and you've got all these different like birds chirping in your ear. So yeah, it gets me so excited. There's so much opportunity to just like really provide clear value. And that's why I'm trying to build something to do it in a more scalable way to at least help, not in a one-on-one, help advisors kind of problem solve and figure out what's the right next step or where to focus resources so that we're not spreading ourselves too thin and not achieving anything.
It was fun watching your guerrilla marketing for your growth guide.
For my growth guide. I know. And now I'm so stressed. I'm over here like working at night on my little growth guide because I'm like, now I told people that I'm working on this constraint guide and now I have to finish it and it's not done.
Yeah, it's everybody's like number one thing they're excited about coming out of Future Proof.
It's now
my
little
all
lead
on your
magnet
shoulders.
that's not done. I know. It's done in my brain. It's all there, but it is a lot of work.
But and to sort of tease the framework for it, and you just touched on it, but it's basically what are the actual roadblocks for you, your constraints for, as you put in your post, getting your business to the next level. Mm-hmm. And so, in other words, the answer to your point is not the same for everybody and every firm. So when you're getting inundated with information and solutions, which solutions are actually matching the things that are specific to me, holding me back? So you need to answer that first, right?
Yeah.
What are the constraints? Why do those constraints exist? And then what are the things to try to, unblock you? Mm-hmm. So there are things, you hear about capacity, and Kitsis did a release of a study about, sort of the points at which you need to hire. So really great insights, but there's a level below that to unpack with each firm of, how are you hiring to complement your skill set? Is that what you're really hiring for? How are you thinking 5 years in the future? There's a lot, even just as it relates to like how you think about your hiring process, that is, you're not going to get in a 30-minute presentation at a conference. So
my little diagnostic I'm working on with the guides that go with it is really focused on kind of the trends I've seen in terms of what those growth constraints are. So really looking at the capacity constraint, which is the founder bottleneck. So that's when kind of the founder of the firm, if they have a team, is still the bottleneck. So there's still what is preventing future growth because they are involved in every single thing. And there's various reasons. I highlight 3 in the guide that this happens, and kind of coming up with ways of working around it or ways of just kind of shifting your mindset to be able to break through that constraint. And then there's the team constraint, which is the one you're talking about. Who do I hire? When do I hire them? How do I onboard them? So just not knowing how to build a team, which a lot of advisors don't want to build a team. It's funny. I talk to so many advisors who really don't want to do people management. They really don't want to hire, and they've avoided it as long as they possibly could. And so it can be very scary, and it can be overwhelming when you look ahead and say, like, who do I hire? When? How do I onboard them? How do I hold them accountable? So there's that one. There's operational complexity constraint, which is where seeds comes in a lot of times. So when someone's hitting that constraint, it's a really easy win for us to just alleviate that operational complexity to kind of streamline and allow you to focus on growth. And then there's the value prop constraint, which is just not having a clear handle on who you're talking to, how you position your services and your offer, and how do you kind of tell that story throughout your one-on-one in your marketing, but also one-on-one with people in your sales process and onboarding process. And then growth engine constraint, which is eventually you get to this point where, like, you have to be able to predict your growth in order to be able to hire and invest in tools and technology. You have to be able to predict how many leads you're going to get and how quickly you're going to be able to convert those leads into customers and how much you're going to make per customer. And this is a huge one where we see a lot of folks get stuck, is just in that engine, trying to build out that engine. So that last one, you always hear people talking about this. You always hear people asking about this. They want details. They want to know how to do this. But oftentimes there's another one that you need to unblock first, because if you just go to that one, say you have capacity constraint as the founder and you just build around your growth engine constraint and you unblock that, now we're even more screwed than we were, because now we have the ability to work leads, but we're failing on service delivery. We're failing on closing the lead. There's so many things. So basically getting into the weeds on all of these details with firms and being able to kind of in-person diagnose, okay, well, it sounds like, yeah, we do want to build that growth engine, but first, let's focus on this. Let's not hire that marketing agency just yet. Let's unblock this other issue first. So those are my 5, and that's what I spent a lot of time talking about. But it was just so exciting to see it resonating with people. And I think I've been hesitating on this and kind of slowly working on it, because I'm kind of like, who am I to put this out? I don't know why. This is just like in my brain and I need to put it out there. But seeing it resonate and actually helping people, I think, was the motivation for me to go finish it and also write a post about it and let you push me to post it.
Like I said at the beginning, I think our main takeaways very much overlapped. And what you just said, I think, kind of tees up how I came away from the conference. What I was thinking was what you said a minute ago, where advisors generally understand they need to sort of figure out how to tell the future, the big picture, right? Like, what is this stuff, that the trends, the things that are coming after my job or not, the big topic of AI. So you get exposure to these seemingly like, ephemeral, like dangerous things, right? These things that may be going to affect you, customer demographics, great, wealth transfer that we've been talking about for a decade, all these big things. And then to your point, very often these firms show up and they've sort of like, maybe best case, half diagnosed their own internal sort of foundational issues. So that constraint framework you're talking about and what you're working on, best case scenario, often firms have sort of a loose idea of answering those types of questions. So that's the headspace you're in to then show up and be inundated with solutions, with shiny objects, right? Here's this point solution that's going to save you this amount of time for this thing. And here's this AI thing that's going to help you do this, and, whatever. And all of these solutions, and then all of a sudden advisors, rather than go back to, and you're going to explain your chicken and egg, you're a chicken analogy, but go back to the root cause. What are the issues first? If you haven't diagnosed the foundational things of how you're running your business, what's constraining you, what's working, what's not, getting that much exposure to solutions is wildly overwhelming. It's deer in headlights. Like, okay, I guess I got to go sign up for 30 new technology solutions and, just increase my OpEx, ironically. But I don't quite know why. I just think it's the medicine to avoid, the AI future or whatever that means. So talk about that. It's we were having a conversation with a specific advisor who I think he used the chicken and egg analogy, and you pointed out
which was a joy.
You are the chicken.
You are the chicken. I know, and it was creepy, and I'm sure he's
never
still thinking about it.
Never gonna talk to us again.
No, but to your point, like most firms and most startups have some variation, some symptoms across all five. And that's the trick. Like that's why these conferences are so exciting, but also overwhelming, because when you hear me, even as I rattled them off, I'm sure anyone listening is thinking, oh yeah, like I have that symptom. Oh yeah, I also have that symptom. And the point is that there's always something that's most important to unblock first. There's always a primary, at least in my opinion, there's always a primary constraint. And if you focus on the wrong one, that primary is still blocking your growth. So you can dump money into marketing, but you're still the bottleneck. So here we are. We're just bumping up against the same constraint. If you don't unblock the right one first, you're still stuck. So yeah, the chicken and egg thing, this is like Zach's favorite. I don't know if it's your favorite, but you say it all the time. And we bicker about chicken and egg because so many people say chicken and egg when really they have a chicken. And I always say that to you. I'm like, nope, we have a chicken. It's going to lay an egg. Like we already have a business. We already have something here. We actually just need to focus on it. You know, it's not a chicken and egg really in most cases. So yeah, there's always an answer if you go deep enough and if you pull the problem apart enough, in my opinion.
Well, and to keep like destroying the analogy, it is amazing how often, and like we've been victims of this in Seeds, but in my wealth business, thinking that these like point solution shiny objects are the chicken.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we don't have a chicken. Yeah.
Right. The somehow saving like an hour a week is the thing that's going to deliver the next 10 years of growth. Mm-hmm. And that's the solve versus really examining the foundational stuff, right? And what's in my head about what that means is really understanding who your customers are, who they're going to be in the future. I think that's a big thing for advisors, right? You may have a customer base that's a certain demographic, age, career, whatever it is. Is that what you're going to sustain into the future? Like a lot of firms haven't answered fundamental questions like that. How are you going to serve whatever that demo is? How are you going to market to that demo? What is the core value proposition around that? How is a team then built around that service offering? How are you going to hire a team and maintain a team? Getting a new lead gen AI tool doesn't solve any of that, right? Mm-hmm. It's such a drop in the bucket. But you see advisors say, coming from a conference, like, okay, I'm going to magically create new leads because now it's AI and that's going to solve all my problems. But you literally don't know what customers you want to serve yet. So there's just
But that's the thing disconnect. Is like most of these solutions are great solutions. Most of these services are great services for the right person at the right time. And that's the key.
In the right order.
In the right order. Yeah. In the right circumstance, then yes, a lot of these solutions are amazing. It's just if you aren't sitting within your own circumstances and like honestly evaluating what needs to come first, second, third, especially if you're a small firm, you don't have a ton of people to delegate this work to, then yeah, it's going to be a challenge for you to really get the value you think you're going to get out of it. If you have all these other problems and now you're onboarding a new AI tool and dealing with all of the ramifications of that, you're not focusing on the other things that need to be addressed within your business. Because say leads did start flowing in, could you service them? Do you have a framework in place for your team to be able to layer under you to continue to service those leads over time? Like what's going right and what's going wrong? There's a lot to unpack there. And I do think it's a very it's why I get so excited, because there's so much to unpack there, but there is typically always an answer. Like there is, I mean, in my experience, there is always an answer.
Well, and to your point, it's exciting what you pointed out at the beginning of this conversation, that advisors seemingly more than ever are recognizing this and going back to these foundational ideas and asking questions. And by the way, it's like, this is basic psychology. It's not unique to advisors where like that easy sort of shiny medicine, whatever, is going to solve all my problems. Like that's a natural tendency to, it's easy to gloss over ironically the most fundamental issues and things that you can, as the business owner, answer and figure out, and jump to the thing that somehow is just like the silver bullet. It's just going to sort of magically fix everything and do it. But yeah, it feels like advisors are recognizing pretty uniquely that they need to go back to these foundational things.
Yeah,
My
and it's
other
hard. I think we should just pause for a second, though, and admit that this is growth in general is very difficult. Like it's hard, it's brutal. It's a lot easier to just remain steady state and continue to, and we know advisors like this, remain steady state, don't really continue to grow, don't really push that or poke at that at all, but continue to go to conferences, acquire new tech, change things, change process, kind of haphazardly do things without really examining if they are successful or not. And I do think, like, as a leader, at least in startups, at least, I can say it's hard. It's hard for me, even as someone who does this all the time. It's hard for me to sit down and be like, well, actually, I just have to go address that hard thing that I don't feel like doing. I have to get rid of that teammate. I have to have that difficult conversation. I have to be disciplined enough to focus on this boring thing for a while, like operations. I have to focus on that for a while. That's really hard, especially for someone who's entrepreneurial. And you could probably speak to this better than me, but someone who has a big vision and who wants to go chase that and who wants to be kind of this, like, innovator within the space, it's definitely a challenge.
Well, chasing is a happy distraction in and of itself, right? To go to the literal conference or explore this new tool or whatever, it's either, hey, I think this can solve my problem, even though probably deep down that it can't, or I don't know, you think that you're allowing it to be a distraction. You're allowing yourself to kind of not, and yeah, I do it myself every day, of the things that I know I could go, outsource something or go focus on some other project for the business that might feel nice as a distraction, or maybe I think is going to help solve it, but really deep down I don't. So yeah, I think exciting that it seems like people are sort of chasing you down at the conference because people are recognizing that issue, as much as, because at the same time, there's never been shinier objects.
Yeah,
right.
For
like
sure.
and maybe that's kind of why it's happening. Like, there's this realization of like advisors just saying like, okay, if I get one more like AI point solution pitch, my head is going to explode. And this realization that maybe what I left back at my office is 95% of the answer. So anyway, it's exciting to see that. The only other thing I wanted to throw in that I think you agree with is, when it comes to the technology, I think advisors are also waking up to a frustration around connecting this stuff together in a cohesive way that's going to actually help them serve their customers' needs. Everybody wants to sell stuff. Seeds wants to sell seeds to advisors, right? We think it's an incredible solution for a zillion reasons. But I do think, to self-promote for a second, that we are uniquely interested in articulating to firms, before articulating anything, understanding how firms operate, and if they've answered those foundational questions, and then making it super clear to them what we solve and don't solve next to other pieces of technology. And I think advisors are having a realization that, yeah, everybody wants to sell their stuff. Nobody really wants to understand what my discovery meetings look like, and who my customers are, and how I've typically positioned myself, and what systems I've used in each step of the experience with my customers, and how I bring data together, and how I do presentations, and how my team supports me in all of this. It's just sort of glossed over. So I think that's another reason because at the end of the day, people understand we're there as seeds. So the fact that they're willing to have a deeper conversation with you and I, not just about what we do, but these deeper foundational questions, is because they see that we actually think it's important. And this isn't to say that all other technology companies don't, but I do think advisors feel that a little bit across the industry. Like, okay, great, your solution is seemingly awesome, but do you really know how that's going to work with all the other things I do and use?
Yeah. It's definitely a challenge. The lack of, I guess you call it integration, but the lack of like data back and forth between all of these systems and the lack of very clear best practices. There's like a million reasons for all of this, but I do think it poses a very unique challenge. I also think all of the tech providers are doing their best to some extent to advise on this and to help fit their solution into advisors' tech stacks. But the reality is that all of these firms, there's so much variation in terms of how a firm works and runs internally, the stage they're at, the skills of the advisor, the skills of the team. Like there's so much variation there that it's very, very difficult. I do think that's one of the reasons, and I say this all the time, but that's one of the reasons I was attracted to the business model here at Seeds, because you can kind of apply that like success mindset of like, we want our advisors to be successful using our tool. We want to really deliver on the promise. And we are still a startup. So there's still a lot of challenges. Our product is still evolving and changing, and there's all of that. But at the root of it, we want them to feel like we are in it with them. We want them to feel like we genuinely care about their business and their issues, and that in any way that we can provide a resource or advice or help or anything, even if it's not core to Seeds, I believe at least that that's going to all come full circle. So even if there are firms where I'm saying right now is not the right time to implement Seeds for you, you need to go do these other things first and come back. My belief is that putting that value out there and just genuinely showing up for advisors is going to pay off. And because we are a basis points on AUM model and not a SaaS subscription, like monthly fee model, I do think we have the ability to do that. Like you always say, advisors achieving their potential or firms achieving their potential is good for our business. So it gives us a little bit more runway, a little bit more space in our business model to get in the weeds and really provide value, even if it's not an immediate ROI to our business, which is one of the most exciting things for me. It lets us focus a lot more on service. And of course, we want to get to a point where our solution is just easy to, like, there's not a ton of service costs. You can just use it and it's immediate value delivery. But I don't think we're ever gonna, or at least not in the foreseeable future, kind of in this industry level up to a point where all these firms are roughly following the same best practices and you can just plug and play any solution as long as it fits within that framework. I do think there's just enough variation on the service model itself and the businesses and all the tech and all of the issues that for a while, at least, we're going to be kind of sitting in the middle of all these problems, I guess is the point.
Yeah, it's a whole other episode, and we've touched on it before, but like building technology, financial services, wealth management is just too inherently broad, and firms do things different ways with different types of customers that there is no ultimate. I almost wrote a different post about the quote unquote ultimate tech stack. Mm-hmm. And the only ultimate tech stack is whatever that means for you and your firm and what services you provide, right? There's too much variation for you to say, you know, this is the best thing next to this thing, next to this thing, next to this thing.
That's why I think the best thing we can do as a provider, talking to hundreds of these firms, is to connect the dots between what we're seeing, because ultimately, when you're sitting in your firm alone and you're networking occasionally, you're not getting that. I get the question all the time, and I got it in previous jobs as well, of like, what are you seeing? What are you hearing? And there's no one size fits all for any of this. The answer is different for every firm, but if you do zoom out enough and if you talk to enough firms that are all within roughly the same stage, you do start to spot trends. It doesn't mean that I could get up on stage and give a presentation that's going to change the lives and businesses of every single firm in the audience, even if they were in the same growth stage. But it does mean that one-on-one or in a smaller, more contained, interaction, we can provide more value if we at least kind of extract, as we work across these firms, what's working, what's not working, what are you seeing? Like, I was talking to one advisor about how I do think there's room in the future for us, and we haven't even talked about this, but for some sort of community building where it's kind of like, I know advisors who are amazing at unblocking 2 of the 5 constraints, but suck at the other 3. And then I know advisors who are really good at 2 of the other ones and suck at the 2 that advisor's good at. And so there is kind of this opportunity to, I think, eventually, once our network is big enough, help connect these firms together and say, okay, here's an advisor who's amazing at value prop and growth engine. Here's an advisor who's awesome at operational complexity. Here's an advisor who knows how to build a team.
Well, Kelsey, how would all the consulting firms survive?
Don't ask me that. Don't ask me that on air. There's great consulting firms out there. I'm not judging all of them, but I do
Yes,
think
there
that
are.
there are just so many problems that it's easy to just say like, oh, I have the solution, without getting in the weeds enough.
That is an exciting future, though, and maybe we can help be a part of that idea, to your point, where, you're a future version of a conference like that is, sure, get inundated with all the technology solutions, seeds included. But yeah, advisors in a room together or on a beach together, actually breaking down these core ideas and how to bring stuff to life in their business.
Yeah, and like kind of peer mentoring. Like I'm manually doing it now of like, hey, I know this advisor who actually is amazing at that. Like, do you want me to see if he's open to connecting with you? Manually we're doing this now. But in the future, if I could get the framework tight enough, it would be very easy for me to say, oh, here are 3 who have all the same challenge, and here are 3 who have crossed that bridge, you know what I mean, already, and may want to pair up.
Biggest takeaway, the summary of your ideas, my ideas, is really your idea, which is you already have a chicken.
Or you have an egg. You have one of the 2.
Yeah. You have something. And I do think, I think the optimist way to look at this is, it's not that you're brushing off your problems. It's that you already have the foundation. You already have some great stuff, and you just need to not get distracted to figure it out.
Well, let's be clear. If you have like over 10 million in AUM, if you have that's the thing. If you're literally brand new, go hustle, go out there, find your clients, test things out.
That's a whole other episode.
That's a whole other episode. But I'm just saying, like, everyone we were talking to was like over 50 million.
It's a good point.
So
it's a good point.
Once you have, that's a chicken. Now I have a chicken. Something is working. It's just about figuring out what is working and what is the right next step. What is the right next constraint to unblock? How do I take the thing that's working and figure out how to make it work more for more customers, more efficiently? That's the real question. So just to be clear on the chicken and egg, there are real chicken and egg. If you're brand new, just stop. Go reach out to people. Go to an event. Network.
But I'd argue similar, right? So exactly, what I'd argue is similar in that, like, if you're at a future proof with 0 under management and 1 client who's your aunt,
mm-hmm.
you don't need an AI note taker tool.
Yeah, you don't need
to
an
know
AI
who
note
your
taker.
customers are, and you need to go get in front of them.
More. Yeah, exactly.
So, okay, well,
this was very casual.
And by the way, what?
This was a very casual conversation. I don't know how I'm going to feel about this.
I don't know. I like it sometimes when we wing it. And by the way, I think, you're going to keep up your LinkedIn game, and we'll talk out of both sides of our mouth, because you will do stages. You'll just hang out with the advisors after you get off stage and help them, implement the things you just talked about.
Everyone's getting an insight into the dynamic. Zach just tries to make me more brave, and then I pick apart our business and understand which problem to unblock next.
Tell me to be less brave and stop.
I tell Zach to be less brave. Zach tells me to be more brave.
Okay, everybody, go check out Seeds if you haven't done it. www.seedsinvestor.com. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.